Hi, I'm Rosh from Energy Matters. Welcome to our podcast, Road to Zero, where we dive headfirst into all things renewable. Join us as we chat with industry experts, tech specialists, and some of your favourite TV and radio personalities, asking the renewable energy questions you want answers to. Our goal, a zero carbon future. I am delighted in this episode to welcome Luke Menzel, CEO of the Energy Efficiency Council. Hi, Luke. How are you?
I'm well. Great to be here.
Mate, thank you so much for joining us. I know you're a very busy man, and with All Energy just around the corner as well, I dare say your commitments are a thousand times more than myself. But look, it's a pleasure to have you on today's podcast.
There's a bit going on, but it's great to be here with you as well.
No, good man. Thanks, Luke. Look, as you know, Luke, Energy Matters is largely a resource, educating the Australian public and those in the industry on the latest and greatest developments in our renewable energy space, as well as connecting consumers to some of the best retailers around the country. And these guys offer some very competitive quotes, which will hopefully lead to the installation of technology in homes and businesses. So smart and all energy for us is going to be a huge event. It's something we're really, really excited about. But aside from all energy, we often get inquiries from both consumers and readers and customers alike, which we've formulated in a few questions for you. Nothing too curly, Luke. I'm sure you'll be, this is stuff that, is second nature to you. So please.
Well, sure, possibly, but you can give me a theatre review at the end and tell me how I've done, Roshan.
Absolutely, man. I'll let the comments determine the... So, Luke, first and foremost, for those who don't know, can you summarise the role the Energy Efficiency Council play in the Australian renewable energy and energy efficiency industry?
Yeah, sure. Look, I saw that last episode you had my friend Kane Thornton on the show. So he heads up the Clean Energy Council, and they really focus on the decarbonisation of what we call the supply side of our energy system. So moving away from coal and gas in terms of where we get our energy and moving towards renewable sources of energy. The Energy Efficiency Council is really a complementary organisation in that we focus on how we use our energy. So that means that we want to make sure that we're using energy as efficiently and productively as we possibly can. It's really important whether you're a home or a business in terms of just the affordability of your energy use, but it's also important in terms of that journey that you were referring to, the journey to a net zero economy, because we can decarbonize the supply side of our electricity system, but if we don't also align our energy use with those renewable sources of energy, we won't get to net zero. So that means we need to electrify those things that are easy to electrify, and there's plenty of opportunities in homes, whether you're talking about space heating or hot water or indeed or cooking. So that's part of what we look at, but we also try and provide guidance on how to do that in a way that's affordable, that's for those of your listeners that have solar systems on their roofs, electrifying in such a way that they're making the best use of those solar resources. And that can include making sure your home has good thermal performance, that you're heating or cooling your home in the middle of the day when that solar resource is abundant, and then that you can effectively use your home as a thermal battery and kind of time shift that heating or that coolth, as we wonks call it, later in the day, so that you're not having to rely on grid supplied electricity later on. So it's a bit wonky, but it's also really exciting. And as time goes on and people get comfortable with their solar panels, thinking about how to get the best use out of them is increasingly where their mind is turning to.
No, absolutely. Look, and fundamentally, I mean, look, controlling your own electricity source by having solar power certainly is the initial starting point. And as you said, making the most of that solar system really is where you start to get, the actual financial benefits inside of energy reduction, not having to utilize the grid as much. And look, really you bang on. So it's interesting to actually have you on the show to obviously discuss, I suppose the separate direction that a customer can go in once they've got the solar power system and what other products they can add. I will get to that in a second. So I've got a question for you as well, Luke. But look, really, in reading about the Energy Efficiency Council, I'm clear that there is a lot of work you do at policy level, at government level, and really having those conversations. And I can imagine some tough conversations at times to question, what is being done and what needs to be done. to move us to that, that direction of the recently, stated 82% renewable energy target by 2030.
Yep.
I mean, from a policy perspective, I mean, what would you consider to be the 3 policy changes which are urgently required by state and government to get us to that target?
So one of the things that the federal government has recently announced is that they're putting in place these sectoral decarbonisation plans. So whether there's a plan for energy, which is largely focused on the electricity and the gas systems, there's a plan for buildings, there's a plan for industry, and that's really good because to date, most of the kind of the political debate and the attention has been focused on that 82% renewable target. And what we say is that we actually have to go full throttle towards that. And no doubt, Kane bent your ear on some of the ways that that can be achieved. But at the same time, like our overall goal is 43% emissions reductions by 2030. And getting there, you don't just want one pathway to victory, you want multiple pathways to victory. So you want to make sure we're utilising energy efficiency. You want to make sure that we're rolling out electrification at the rate that we want to. And if we have those multiple pathways to victory, if we're sort of leaning into the task of electrifying homes, for example, aligning it with those renewable resources, it actually makes it easier to hit that 43% target because you're starting to shift some of that gas use out of the residential market, particularly in states like Victoria, where there's a huge amount of reliance on gas for things that can be easily delivered by a heat pump, by a highly efficient electric unit. So that's kind of number one, is like spreading our effort, like making sure that we're continuing to drive really hard on the renewables, but also, raising our efforts in other parts of the economy, like electrifying transport. I know you guys are really interested in like the transition to EVs, electrifying what we call low temperature process heat, both within households and within businesses. Thinking about how we can support the ag sector on that journey. In broad terms, that's really important. That's probably number one. In terms of households in particular, making it really straightforward for our homes to upgrade their appliances and their thermal performance is one of the really big challenges that both state and federal governments are grappling with at the moment. So there were 2 really big energy commitments in the federal budget back in May. One was called a Hydrogen Head Start program. It was dumping a couple of $1 billion into ramping up that industry. But the other big commitment was actually on energy performance. And there was $1 billion for the Clean Energy Finance Corporation to start providing low-cost finance to households to do things like, put in a heat pump or go all electric in their home. And that's a recognition from the government that it's actually at the moment pretty hard for households to not have to do a huge amount of research to find quality providers that they can trust to upgrade their appliances or to improve the thermal performance. There needs to be a lot more focus on that area, and they're trying to kind of jumpstart that, catalyze that ecosystem into developing a market which can deliver home upgrades for energy performance in a way that is safe, in a way that delivers a high quality outcome for the consumer. So that's something which state and federal governments are really focused on, and we need more effort in this space. And I guess the third piece of this, the one that we'd really focus on, is how we bring like the more vulnerable cohorts in society along for the journey, like renters, people in social housing. Folk in apartments often don't have a lot of control over their energy use. There's a real danger that some of those more vulnerable cohorts, the people that don't have a lot of control or don't have a lot of money to spend, they get left behind. And to maintain the momentum that we need to get to some of those ambitious net zero targets, we're going to need to really, really strongly engage with those parts of the market that aren't necessarily going to have the wherewithal to do it themselves. And that's probably the third priority I'd highlight, Roshan.
So inside of I suppose both the vulnerable, but as well as with apartments and some other demographics and other types of buildings which don't really have the same opportunity. I mean, is there a lot of dialogue happening at that level? I mean, if you look at Victoria, for example, I mean, the program that's rolled out around VEETS has been hugely successful, and the uptake of energy efficiency monitors and of now heat pumps has been huge. But I suppose what sort of dialogue is taking place to encourage both federal and state government to look at those other sort of areas?
I think that what there's an increasing recognition of is that some of those harder to reach sections of the market are going to need a lot more support in terms of funding support. But
Yeah.
there's also going to be a certain amount of regulation that's needed to come into play. So one of the sort of the policy conversations that we get involved in is what are the requirements for minimum energy performance standards for a rental? Like, you know, so if you buy a house as of today, we're recording in October 2023. You know, pretty much all around the country, the minimum energy performance for a home that you buy is 6 stars, and it's moving to 7 stars as we speak. The average performance of a home built before 2005 is about 1.8 stars. So, and that would actually be illegal to sell as a new home today because it's so crappy. You've just got heat leaking out. It's unhealthy to live in a home like that. It's really, really expensive to keep warm in winter and cool in summer. And yet, if you're a landlord, it's perfectly fine for you to rent that out, and you don't necessarily even think as a landlord about, you know, well, energy performance is one of the things you're offering. And so over time, what we're moving to is just saying, what is a safe, comfortable home look like? And it doesn't mean you have to upgrade it to 6 stars, but you probably do need to upgrade it to 3 at least to be actually providing a safe and comfortable home for your tenants. And then, you know, put in some regulation that isn't necessarily the favourite thing of people around the country, but how can we support landlords to make those upgrades with some incentives along the way, particularly those that sort of get it and they're willing to act early. So it's a, you know, as always with policy, us policy wonks, we're always talking about carrots and sticks. I sometimes like to talk about tambourines as well to kind of get people excited about the journey. That can be helpful as well. But between the carrots and the sticks and the tambourines, we can get there, Roshan.
No, fantastic. And I know every landlord's worst nightmare is having to spend on their property. You know, they'd rather just, you know, take advantage of the strong rental market and get them out there. But, you know, they do need to, and I suppose, like, you know, the incentives are fantastic because it makes it more affordable. Yep. But there does require a stick at time to get them in action.
And the other thing I'd say is that there's some interesting ideas floating around in terms of how you can better structure the tax system around rental properties to actually incentivize landlords to make these changes. So at the moment, if you're only able to write off an equipment replacement to the degree that it's a like for like, so replacing a gas boiler with a gas boiler is okay, but replacing a gas boiler with a more expensive heat pump, you're not going to get the full tax benefit. So there's simple things that can actually just make it easier for landlords to make that call when the opportunity arises. And I know crossbenchers like Allegra Spender have been thinking about, you know, instant asset write-offs for landlords, and like the conversation is starting to get moving, and there's starting to be that recognition that you need the targeted policy in some of these more difficult spaces. Indeed, in about 6 or 7 weeks, the Energy Efficiency Council with a bunch of our partners is pulling together, you know, we'll get through all energy, that'll be great. We're pulling together a residential energy performance summit, which is actually all entirely focused on unpicking some of these tricky challenges and bringing the industry together around how we make sure that we're delivering quality, delivering upgrades safely, and scaling the industry up, because it's the next great opportunity for the clean energy sector.
When is that summit coming up? Just to
that's in Melbourne, and it's on the 21st of November, and we're doing that in partnership with the Victorian Government and with the Clean Energy Finance Corporation. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Is that going to be at the convention centre as well?
It's actually at Ridges in Melbourne. So we're treating it as a genuine summit. So bringing it together, asking everyone to roll up their sleeves, and from all parts of industry and government and academia and other experts coming together to really think through some of the thornier challenges of how we scale up this residential ecosystem, stand on the shoulders of solar, and take that residential energy performance conversation to the next level.
Fantastic. Well, on that, so as a homeowner, I'm listening to this podcast, watching this podcast, I'm thinking, great, well, I've got solar power installed, I want to get a battery, I want to get an EV. What actions should I take around my energy efficiency? What can I add to my home now to improve its thermal performance, to actually improve my energy efficiency?
Yeah, look, there's a sort of pretty standard checklist that one works one's way through. There's a few big energy uses in a home. You've got your hot water, you've got your space heating and cooling. Now, depending where you're listening into from around the country, you might use more heating if you're in Victoria. If you're in the Northern Territory, I was speaking to some friends up there. They basically got the air conditioner on 24/7 most of the year, right? So it's all about the air conditioning load up there. And so very, very different depending on what climate zone you're in. But, that air conditioning, if I use that term broadly for both heating and cooling, is generally a very significant energy use. There's a lot of conversation around cooking. It's actually very small in terms of its energy use and its carbon footprint. So if there was one last thing to go, often people leave the gas there and they move to the induction cooktop, which is it's a fantastic piece of kit, but it's not necessarily going to shift your bill very significantly in any particular direction. So, I mean, what we'd encourage people to do is think about those big chunks of energy use and then be ready when equipment fails to kind of move to the next generation technology. So that's sort of getting your head around what the transition from a gas hot water system to a heat pump hot water system looks like, what your plan would be to move away from gas for heating, and just starting to talk to some of the trades and local experts that can take you on that journey. And of course, the other thing that we always like to remind people of is going back to that. I said the average home built before 2005 is 1.8 stars in terms of energy performance. Having a look at your thermal performance, that's insulation and draft proofing. Ceiling insulation is a particularly big win. As I say, homes don't need to get to 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 stars. Just going from 1.8 to 3 or 3.5 stars can make a huge difference in terms of comfort, in terms of health, in terms of affordability. Just making sure that, have you seen, you talk to all kinds of people. I'm sure you've seen these images of, people pointing thermal cameras at homes, and it's just like vast waves of heat emanating from the homes, and it's just like what are you're heating your front yard, like that is a fairly expensive proposition. Right? Like it's it's absolutely worth paying some attention to that. Now, what I would say is that homeowners don't have to do this all at once, and they don't have to rip everything out immediately. It's kind of about making a plan and knocking things over as they fail. And if you do that, you'll be in a very good position. You'll get to the position ultimately that your bills are incredibly low because you're utilising the solar resource on your roof. But you're also, if you to the degree that you care about the emissions that you're generating, your carbon footprint, it'll also help bring that down over time as well.
No, which is absolutely fantastic. On carbon footprint, as you know, Energy Matters, we believe in a zero carbon future. And I want to ask your opinion on this one, Luke. There's a lot of skeptics out there about climate change. Obviously, we understand what's happening in the industry, but on the planet. But I guess, in your opinion, as we move towards a net zero carbon future, what would be the climatic impact of continuing at the current pace of adoption and transition to clean energy and energy efficiency?
Okay, so what we're from a climate change perspective, there's a certain amount of climate change that's already locked in. That's just the way that the physics of climate change works, and we haven't really bent the curve of emissions to the degree that we need to hit the kind of the degree of climate change that is widely regarded as safe, which is kind of around that 1.5 degrees of temperature change. Now, that means more extreme weather events. That means things like rising sea levels, all the things that we've talked about. It's interesting. It's interesting you say there's still a lot of climate skeptics around. I suppose you're right, but I think there's a lot fewer than there used to be, and it's because people are seeing the impacts in their lives. Like climate change isn't some sort of esoteric off in the future sort of a apocalyptic scenario. It's the bushfires and the floods, and they're happening. Not every couple of years now. They're happening every 6 months, and that's unfortunately just the reality that we're going to be moving through over the next decade. Now, that could give rise to a certain amount of pessimism or people throwing up their hands and saying it's all too hard. What we know from the climate science is that there's even if we're overshooting 1.5, if we can't hit that target, our next target should be 1.6. And if we can't hit 1.6, 1.7, because there's a massive difference between, say, 2 degrees of warming and 2.5 and 3 and 3.5. Like we just got to keep that average warming as low as we possibly can. Now, there's a lot of people, and the International Energy Agency released a report just last month. We talked about it on one of my podcasts, which is sort of stating very categorically that we still have a pathway to 1.5. It involves closing coal-fired power. It involves ramping up, like doubling renewable capacity or tripling renewable capacity by 2030, doubling the rate of energy efficiency improvement by 2030, and really kind of leaning into electrification of all of those applications that we were talking about earlier, low temperature process heating in homes and the like. So we can still do this, is the message from the International Energy Agency. And that's where, we sort of talk about what one can do in your household at home, and that ladders up to a big global challenge, right? And if, we have that sort of sense of collective action and enthusiasm for the task, we can keep a safe climate. And to the degree that, it takes a little bit of time to ramp up action to the level needed to, that just means we redouble our efforts and keep going as hard as we possibly can to keep that temperature change as low as we possibly can.
No, fantastic. And look, I can certainly see, from a consumer level, I mean, certainly the narrative is well and truly sunk in, and people know they have to do something and start to make a difference. And it's been very well, even from an education point of view. My 13-year-old, even when she was age 7 or 8, was coming home letting us know about turning off lights, recycling. Yep. Which is absolutely fantastic. So it's great that, once the kids are on board, it starts to go upwards, and the parents kind of get their heads together and think, we should do something about it. But really, we do need that sort of federal and state government support and funding fundamentally to give it a nudge in the right direction, and to essentially say that before there's an absolutely, clearly climate change has kicked in, and as you said before, things like bushfires and sort of droughts, extreme weather events in terms of rain, all those things are really very much indicators as to what's to come. It's not all doom and gloom, as you said. No. If we can sort of get things under balance and under wraps and start to take action, then look, we're certainly going to leave this planet in at least a reasonable state for our kids and their kids and their kids to do what they need to do. Absolutely. So certainly we are moving in that direction, which is good. On another note, and on a lighter note, with All Energy coming up very, very soon, a couple of weeks, or in fact next week, what are you most looking forward to?
Well, there's so much going on at All Energy. It's actually hard to keep track of. Like, I've been going to probably All Energy for a decade now, and some of the joy of All Energy is just like letting it sort of take you on into the slipstream, and kind of, there's all of these panels and different talks, and obviously the amazing exhibitors. So kind of, to a degree, I'll be twirling around like a leaf on the wind, Roshan. But I will say my organisation is, partners with the folk that run All Energy on the energy management zone, which is where we sort of dig into all the stuff that we've been talking about today.
Yes.
So it's the energy efficiency, it's the smart load management to align, energy usage with the availability of renewables. It's the electrification agenda. And so in the energy management zone, on the showroom floor, my colleagues from the Energy Efficiency Council, Jeremy Sung, our head of policy, and Rachel Wilkinson, who leads on our strategic technologies, will be chairing a bunch of really incredible panels like retrofitting for net zero, enhancing wellbeing and cutting costs through energy efficiency in homes, harnessing the demand side to support a reliable, efficient, zero emissions electricity grid. And we're also doing some deep dives on sort of energy management systems within homes. We're going to be jumping into what's going on with heat pump hot water systems in particular, both from a policy and a technology perspective. And then we're also looking at that big topic of insulation and thermal performance, and how we sort of really scale up the rollout of better performing thermal performance in buildings right around the country. So some really fun topics in there. So for your viewers and listeners who, they've seen a few solar panels, they've seen a few battery panels, they may be called a hydrogen panel, and you want to sprinkle in a little garnish of energy efficiency on the way through, you can head on down to the energy management zone. The other one that I'll give a shout out to, because both the Energy Efficiency Council and the Clean Energy Council are very excited about this, co-located with All Energy on the second day of the All Energy event, we've got the Careers for Net Zero Fair.
Yes.
And so this is the event where we're really putting a spotlight on the need for a clean economy workforce, and all kinds of people. Like, obviously we need trades, and we need electricians and engineers and plumbers and project managers. They're sort of the very familiar sort of representatives of the clean energy sector, but we need accountants and communications experts and lawyers and all kinds of other professions. We kind of need everybody to be coming in and leaning in, because what we've got is a huge opportunity. We've got a lot of technology. We've got governments that are, for the most part, pretty enthusiastic about this transition. What we don't have is people. And this campaign that we're launching at the Careers for Net Zero Fair, the Energy Efficiency Council and the Clean Energy Council, is really about, highlighting the opportunity. And, if you want to make a contribution to that net zero economy, listener at home, you absolutely put solar panels on your roof. Absolutely, install a couple of heat pumps and move to induction cooktop, align the loads. Wonk out by all means, but also come and work in this sector, because this is the moment to bring your talents and expertise, whatever they are, to bear on this great challenge of our lifetime. So that'd be my pitch. So wander over and come and say hello to us at the Careers for Net Zero Fair as well on day 2 of All Energy.
No, fantastic. And my wife works for the Deco Group, and she'll be there. So she was like, "I'm attending this conference." What? Same conference I'll be at.
Oh, good on you.
Absolutely fantastic. Luke, thank you so much for your time today. I do appreciate it. For anyone out there who hasn't registered as yet, or looking to get into the industry or in the industry, make sure you do register to attend this year's All Energy Conference at the Melbourne Convention Exhibition Centre, 25th and 26th of October. Just remind you, it is completely free to attend. So for me, it's probably one of the best value events of the entire year, because if you were paying to see some of the caliber of these speakers, including Luke, you'd be paying a few $1,000s. So this is completely free of charge. And of course, if you are going to be there, check out the Energy Management Zone as well. I'll be there too, and listen to the different changes and implementation into that part of the industry, which is fantastic. Luke, thank you so much once again. It's been a pleasure having you on our show.
It's been a lot of fun. Thanks, Roshan.
You're very welcome. So, guys, you heard it here first. All Energy, Energy Management Zone, and Careers Fair. So if you are unemployed or looking to change employment and looking to get into our industry, come along and check out what's available. You certainly will be very, very open-minded and, wowed by the technology that's available to today. To rewatch this podcast and to get the latest energy updates, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out our social media on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And once again, thank you very much for your time today.